Welcome! I am author D.M. Patterson, and in this video I'm going to give 4 tips on getting from the idea stage onto the writing journey. This is probably one of the most frequent things I hear. Some sort of variation of the phrase or question, I have an idea for a book and I don't know what to do, or I've been stuck with this idea for a book. Can you help me start? I don't know what to do. Now, my very sarcastic and short answer to that would be, well, go write it. But I know it's not that simple. I absolutely understand that having an idea in your head is not the same and is not as easy as sitting down and writing it out. Now, there are far more than 4 tips to help get you from the idea stage into writing. I just think that these 4 tips that I have and I'm going to go over with you will help you at least get the ball rolling, get you into a place where you can start getting into that journey. I did number them 1 through 4, but that was just for organization. There was no priority assigned to them. And like I said, there are definitely more than 4 tips out there. These are just the ones that I want to focus on right now. Number 1, create a place to write. What I mean by that is develop a place that is somewhat permanent that you can go to over and over again to write. If you are interested in doing research, there are a lot of sources out there that can help you understand the psychology behind creating a place that is just for you to write. It can also help you develop things to put in that place, understand why you do it, give you tips on where you should go, things like that. But it is very important that you can establish for yourself a place where you're going to sit down and write. And I do say somewhat permanent in that you don't necessarily want to have to rely on too many outside variants that you can't control. For example, if you really like being outside, that's wonderful, but the weather is a variant. If you like going to your favorite local cafe, again, that's wonderful. But whether or not that cafe is open or closed, if you have place to sit down and write, those are all variants that you cannot control. I'm not saying that you can't go there. I'm just saying that you want to have a place that is somewhat permanent, that you know you can rely on and is going to be there for you to write. You don't necessarily have to do the research behind creating that space and knowing what to put in it. You can develop something like that over time on your own based on how you feel when you're in that spot. It is just important that you create a habit. It's part of getting the mind, kind of tricking it, but also creating that habit of when you're in that spot, you're going to be creating, you're going to be writing. It can even be some sort of, hey, if you are in a house with other people, I'm in this spot, please don't bother me. This is my writing spot. Now here's my plug for your local library. Sometimes they have rooms that you can rent out, a study room or conference room, something like that, if you need a place that is very quiet. Also, the bonus of being in a library is you have resource books if you need them. Number 2, focus on the idea. What I mean by that is over time, I've realized that when someone says they don't know what to do with their idea, it's not necessarily that they don't know that they should sit down and write the story. What's overwhelming them is the whole publishing process. It's the question of, how do I market? Should I find an editor? The overwhelming idea of all the stuff that happens after the writing starts, it stops them from writing at all. I do understand that it is very overwhelming to think about editors, publishers. Should you self-publish? I mean, there's so many questions out there. How do you market? What do you do as an author to market yourself? Should you get on XYZ social media to get this book going? It is all very overwhelming, and I understand that. But if that is what's stopping the idea from getting to actually being written, then take a deep breath, Stop thinking about all of the stuff that needs to go afterwards and think about writing the idea and the story itself. Another side note that I would say was important to actually start writing your idea before you market and before you try looking for publishers and things like that is as you write it, things may change. It's part of the journey. It's part of the writing experience that you could have an idea that is this over here, and as you write it, it turns into this over here. And most of the time, it's for the better. So take a deep breath, stop worrying about the whole thing that's going to happen down the road, and let that journey begin of writing the idea first. Number 3, accept it is a journey. And I do mean journey. Whatever your idea is, a collection of poetry, a collection of short stories, a novel, a series, it's going to take time to develop. And that alone can also be very overwhelming. But understanding that you're not going to overnight get the idea out onto paper and then it's perfect and a bestseller the next day. I don't know of anyone who can do something like that. And if they can, I would love to talk to them and find out how. For the most part, there's going to be time in between the idea and the finished product. There's going to be the editing. There's going to be the revisions. There's going to be taking stuff out, moving things around, editing this, taking that character out, adding another one. And it can be hard. It can be very hard to see your idea potentially morph into something else. But if you accept that this is what's going to happen, this is part of writing, it is going to take a while, it's going to morph a little bit, it might turn out to be different from what you thought, that is going to help you continue along the way. I know once again that it can be very disheartening to know that you have this idea that may take a long time. I did discuss one of my projects, which is my Cambodia project, and I have accepted that it's going to take me quite a while to do it. I have a lot of research that I want to add to my project, and that's going to make things take longer than just coming up with something from my head. But I feel that it's very important to do that research, and I know that even though it's going to stretch my project out longer than I would like, it needs to be done. I guess this would be where I would add in Carpe Diem. Get it out, focus on that. It's going to be a journey, accept it. It's going to be a beautiful journey. You're going to learn things on the way. You're going to develop as an author along the way, and your story is going to develop along the way. My fourth and final one for this video is, what is stopping you? I think it is important, sometimes, depending on what the idea is, to stop and really reflect on what it is that is stopping you. Sometimes having to face and accept that, or process it, or whatever it is that needs to be done to move on, is the only thing that is keeping you from the idea to the actual product. Sometimes there is a psychological element that is stopping the idea from coming to fruition. If it is something that is very personal, the idea is to write about something very difficult that somebody went through, that could be hard to write, and that stopping could be, it's very difficult to process it. It's difficult to talk about that subject. Sometimes that thing that is stopping an author is self-doubt, thinking that nobody else will like their idea, so why write it? I know there are many reasons psychologically that would stop an author from going from the idea into the writing journey. And they could be very deep. They can be very difficult to deal with, and I understand that. I will give you another personal example of mine. I haven't begun talking about this here on my YouTube channel, but I have on my website. My 3 sisters are legally blind from a genetic disease that I did not get. I am working on a YA novel that is talking about how I processed basically my survivor's guilt and how difficult it was to go through high school knowing that 3 of my sisters are legally blind and dealing with something very difficult while I am not. It took me a long time to start writing that idea, and in fact it took me a long time to figure out how to write it, what my framing devices were going to be, etc., which we can talk about all of that in future videos. However, I say that to say I do understand sometimes there is a psychological element to starting an idea that is very difficult, that needs to be dealt with first before that idea can come out onto paper. Sometimes I feel like those stories are the most important to be written because the author needs to have that journey of writing it, to process it, to work through it, to have closure, whatever it is that is needed to get that story out. It is a very psychological thing, and that is very difficult. It's a very hard part of that writing journey that we talked about in number 3. I know that there are far more tips that are needed than just these 4 to help you go from the idea phase into the writing story. Some of them are techniques, which we will get into in future videos. Those are the easy parts. Talking about framing devices, like I mentioned, character development, dialogue, that's the easy part. We can get into that. You can start working on that on your writing journey. I know that the 3 of the tips that I mentioned are very difficult, and sometimes they are the biggest hurdle for an author to overcome in order to get into their writing journey, because there's so much about the process that can be very overwhelming. And if you sit and focus on all of that, then yes, it's good. Your idea is just going to be stuck. It's not going to go anywhere. I have even experienced that along my journey, even now, even though I've been writing for several years. It can be overwhelming to think about all that needs to be processed, all that needs to be done, how long the journey can be. There's a lot of self-doubt that can creep in the meantime. But I promise, if you just keep going, keep getting that idea out there, keep believing in yourself, keep understanding that this story needs to be written for you and you alone, and nobody else matters, you will get there. You will get to the end, and it's going to be a wonderful process. I probably will do a few more of these as I think of some more tips from my experience of what people have asked me to help sort out what it is that I believe is stopping authors from going from the idea phase into the actual writing process. If you have anything you would like to add, or if you have anything you would like for me to expound on, please comment below. If there's something that helped you too, a moment of realization where you were able to jump from the idea right into the process, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. And now, go write.